Okay, truth or BS? Johnny Cochran told Chris Darden, please N-word.
I don't know that he did that. I don't believe that happened. I don't believe it happened in court because the microphones were really sensitive and they would have picked it up. Mics were really sensitive and it became an ongoing issue in the court.
Marsha Clark.
But they did whisper to each other. There were whispers, and you did see them taunting each other.
Really?
It's possible he said it.
So it was personal.
Darden never talked to the people who were doing the show, and he's never said that publicly. But there was tension.
Right.
Yes.
Marsha Clark is a bad lawyer. True or BS?
Look, Marsha Clark did not prosecute this case well. She just didn't. Now, Marsha Clark had a good record before this. I think what you have to look at is not whether she's a bad lawyer, is whether she was out-lawyered. And what Johnny Cochran did brilliantly was Johnny Cochran put the prosecution on trial. The prosecution didn't put the defense on trial. Johnny decided, I'm going to put the LAPD on trial, and Marsha played into it, and Marsha ended up defending the LAPD rather than prosecuting OJ Simpson.
Marsha Clark said that there is no way that she thinks, now, she just gave an interview recently saying that she doesn't believe there's any way to reach that jury. That the case was never going to be won because there was no way for her to win that.
My recollection is Marsha said that to Chris, you probably lost the case because of the glove thing, and I'm upset you did it, but we would have lost it anyway. Right. But I think she's saying that with a lot of history, and the history is, again, that she let Johnny control the case. You know, they put a coroner on the stand for 8 days.
What's his name again?
Lakshmanan Satyavagiswaran.
Yeah.
And they should have put the coroner on the stand for 2 hours maximum. And they bored the jury. They got into the difference between this RFLP test and other DNA tests. And they were boring the jury. I mean, there are other ways of presenting a case where you streamline it. When Johnny said, we're going to tell a story, that is good lawyering. Yeah. That it's not this piece of evidence and this piece of evidence. It's telling me a story. And they started to tell the story when they talked about his domestic violence and everything else, but it got lost in minutia and got lost by letting Johnny take the case over, which is what happened.
In opening statements, did Johnny Cochran really crush Darden the way it portrayed in the show?
Well, that wasn't opening statements. That was a motion to exclude. That was a motion to exclude
right.
evidence before opening statements, where Darden was trying to get the judge to prohibit.
Like Johnny made him his bitch.
Johnny was very forceful there, and that is essentially the way it came down. The opening statements were funny. I mean, when you think about it, the opening statements, I think each one lasted almost like 5 hours, and what you saw was 4 sentences. It was like LA Law, but they're not going to do the whole, opening statement. It was their opening statements were not 60 seconds,
right?
And that's what they showed in the show. But what are they going to do? They're not going to show 5 hours of it.
When they blacked up the house and they went in there and swapped all the stuff out, how is that legal? How can you go in there and completely change
because
a
it wasn't a crime scene, and by the time they went to the house,
but I thought that's where the
it was initially. But they released it as a crime scene. People were living in the house.
So you can do whatever you want.
Do whatever you want in the house, and there was no order saying you can't touch anything. It wasn't a crime scene. Johnny said, it wasn't even a loophole. Johnny said, hey, this is OJ's house. We're going to redecorate a little bit. And they redecorated.
You knew Johnny. If Johnny was alive right now and was watching the OJ trial, the show, what would Johnny think of the show?
Well, Johnny would like the show because it does make Johnny brilliant, but properly brilliant because he was. Johnny was flashy, by the way. I'm just amused by how... people are upset that they're showing Johnny as this slick guy wearing fancy shirts and wore a silk bathrobe.
Did he have gold pajamas?
I've never been in Johnny. I was never in Johnny's bedroom, but I can tell you, I would bet a lot of money that Johnny had silk pajamas and a silk bathrobe. That's who Johnny was. Johnny was a flashy, cool guy and an amazing guy. And absolutely, I mean, but that's one of the things that was great about Johnny, that Johnny had flash and he had more than enough substance to back up the flash.